everybody, welcome back to the channel. Okay, I've got a few more apologies to make. The first apology is in relation to the results for the bass tracks that which was the first part of the critical listening series. I had thought I had recorded this and that I had released it, but in actual fact, all of that leading up to me traveling overseas for the last month, it slipped through my realizing that it hadn't actually been published, and somehow I've lost that video. So I'm going to reshoot it now, obviously, and I'll release it straight away. And this will be the results and what you should be listening for in the first part of that critical listening series, which was to do with that very troublesome octave we call bass. So let's get into it. The first track for bass was Cashmir by Marcin. Now this is a very dynamic track. If you've listened to it, you would understand exactly what I'm talking about. It's very dynamic. You've got to be a little careful about where you set your volume on this, depending on what your system's able to cope with. But this track is very dynamic. There are lots of transient swings in this track, and there's a lot of tonal change in the lower octave. So what I mean by that is bass notes have lots of tonal changes in them. So when you're focusing on this track, I mean, there's lots of things on this track that are pretty extraordinary, but we're using it today for bass. So what I would like you to be listening for are tonal changes in the bass notes that are played in this track. You want to focus on that area of it. You want to be listening for those changes in tone, because if it all sounds like one big bassy mess, then there's obviously possibly room acoustic issues to deal with, and your system just may not be able to cope with the nuances and the tonal changes in the bass lower octave there. You're listening for that. If you can hear those tonal changes and they're very clear, and you can hear the different tone in the bass guitar and bass notes in this particular track, then your bass is pretty resolute, and it means you're hearing all of those subtle changes. These aren't so subtle in this particular track. You really should be able to hear that. So hopefully you're listening for that. Again, like I said in the video I shot with the results of mid-range, leave your comments below. I really want to hear, after you've played these tracks, what you are hearing in your system and whether that you're hearing the things that I'm describing. Now, a subscriber mentioned to me that I should list the tracks in the description below this video. So I've done that with mid-range, and I will do that with this video as well. So you'll be able to find the track and the artist written in, as track 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. As you heard them listed that way on the short videos that I've done of those tracks. So the reason I do them as shorts is because there's potential copyright strikes and issues in regards to playing the whole track for you. So if I do it as a short, usually at the bottom of the short it scrolls up the artist and the track, so you can see it there. But on some tracks that I've been using, it doesn't give any results as to what the track is. So it's fair enough. I will go through them from here on in, and I will list the tracks and the artists in the description below the video. So look there to find them. I stream on Qobuz, so all these tracks are readily available on Qobuz. I suggest that just about all of them will be there, if not all of them there on Tidal as well. And certainly Spotify and some of the really big library streaming services will have them, but try and listen to them in high res if that's available to you, or CD quality. It's really the best way to get all of these little nuances that I'm describing so that you can understand them. Righto, so that's track 1. Track 2 is The Little Sneak by Carlton. Now this is another really beautiful studio recording, and I put this one in because I just love how well this track has been recorded. On this one, for nice deep drum strikes. So the hits on the drums should really feel deep, and you should really be able to feel that in your room through your system if your bass is well sorted out. So you're listening for nice deep drum strikes. As I said, it's a really good studio recording. Great bass guitar. So what you're listening for there is that bass guitar. You want to focus on those two bass instruments in these tracks, drums and the bass guitar. That seems to be prevalent in most of the bass tracks that I'm playing here, that I've given you to listen to, because they're relatively easy to focus on those instruments. And what you're listening for, what you want to be hearing, is that sense of realism that I talk about. So hopefully most of you have got reference to what a drum kit sounds like when you hear it live. Most of you should understand, hopefully you've heard a bass guitar and how that sounds in its live form. So that's the reference to which you're trying to relay in your own system to get that same feeling of realism. And how we get there is a combination between room acoustics, room setup, component selection, on and on it goes. But they're the main things that you need to be focusing on. This series will help you listen further into the music. This is what I'm hoping. Really hear a good recording and understand what a good recording should sound like. And you're listening for nothing that should stand out to you, that sounds grating or sounds bright or thin or and some of that is some of that is hi-fi system playback, but a good recording should sound natural and alive, and that's really what you're sort of listening for there. So bass guitar should really be able to hear the differences in the notes, the changes in the notes through the bass guitar here. Focus on the bass guitar and the drums in this track. Look at those two instruments. It's a beautiful track anyway. The guitar on Larry's playing of the guitar is also stunning in this particular track, as it's so well recorded. So enjoy it for that at a later stage, but this is a great track for really understanding how drums should sound when they're recorded correctly in a studio, and how a bass guitar should sound. So focus in on those two and you'll be all right on that track. So track 3. So track 3 is a fun track. It's called Drum Stop No, and it's by Steve Smith. So this particular track, again, it's a drum and a bass guitar track, but they are the two instruments that are really quite easy to pick out, as I said, and you can really focus on them and try and get that sense of naturalness in your room with them when you're set up right and you're critically listening into the music. I mean, it just sounds like it's a wonderful, wonderful drum track. This it really has percussive dynamics about the drum strikes in this track, and it has that lovely, you can hear the body of the drum actually resonate after Steve hits the drum skin. You should really, if you've got a really good system that's tuned in beautifully, you're in the right spot, the room acoustics are right. When you're listening into that track, you should literally be able to hear the strike on the drum and then that skin resonate through the body of the drum. And that's the sort of thing you're listening for to get that real sense of a drum kit being played in your room. Bass guitar on this one's a bit funky and slappy, so you'll hear that in the recording. But again, it's tonally changing all the time. We don't want that bass just to bloom into the room and get muddy and sound like one note, because that's not how bass should be. It's tonal. It has frequencies. So as we reproduce it, and notes in that lower octave. So you want to be picking out those changes, those tonal changes in the notes. If you're picking that up, you will definitely be on the right track. So that's that one. So the fourth track that I picked was purely a vocal track. It's an a cappella track. It is the Fairfield 4 singing Those Bones. Now I use this one a lot. You've probably heard it a fair bit on the channel. And the reason I pick it, and I also use this one for imaging as well, because in my system I can clearly hear where all 4 of those vocalists are across the soundstage. They are all in different positions across the soundstage. The bass baritone singer is just inside the left channel, so it should be on my system. He's literally about there, so just inside that left channel. The lead is right in the middle, and you'll hear the other 2 vocalists also in that track. very clearly defined with lots of air around them. But that's for another day. That's imaging. But it's certainly a track I use for that as well. But what you want to listen for in this track is that bass baritone's vocal. It should sound alive. There's a raspiness in sections of the way he phrases his lyrics or his part in this track, and you want to listen for all of that natural throat. It's almost throat singing, so you want to hear that rattle of his vocal cords, and the depth in that vocal. So we're listening again for believability, for humanity, for a natural sounding vocal. But this is deep down. This is low bass. And in a good system that can cope with these frequencies, you will hear all of that depth and that meat in that voice. So listen for that on that particular track and you won't go wrong. And the last one, well, this is another really dynamic track. Now, I played this track on that system, that CH Precision von Schreika system in the Philippines. And the guys hadn't heard that track before, and we were shaking the air conditioning vents in the listening room. They were surprised. I picked a few tracks that we played, a pipe organ piece as well, which I don't play on many systems because they just can't cope with it. And neither can a lot of systems cope with this. So be mindful of where the volume is on this track, because it is very quick transients, very dynamic, and this is a huge big Chinese drum that this man is striking with literally timber mallets. And so imagine that, and with all the depth and the strike and the power that can be put into playing this drum. And there's lots of depth, so I also use this one for soundstage depth. It's about a 10-minute track. It's really worth listening to the whole thing. And you'll hear parts of it where it runs away from you backwards, away from the speakers. Yeah, and that's also soundstage depth, which is something else we'll talk about in further episodes of this series. But in this particular thing, I want you to concentrate on the drum strikes. And I want you to hear the resonances that happen around this huge big drum. You should really be able to hear it, and it is percussive. In my room, it hits me in the chest, especially after I put the Stack Audio Over 100s underneath my speakers, and I stop losing energy into the ground. And all of that energy just comes forward at me in the listening chair, and it is quite exhilarating. It really does feel like you are standing there, and that is happening right in front of your eyes. So that's the sort of thing you want to be listening for there. Getting that percussive pressurization of the sounds of the listening room. But again, as I say, please be careful where you play this volume-wise, because if your speaker system isn't up to it, you will run out of excursion with your drivers very quickly on this track. It is very dynamic, but it's also a great test for transient attack on the lower octave. So on that particular track, we're listening for sharp get in and get out type motions on that drum. So that's all about damping factor and the capacitance and grip your amplifier has over your bass drivers. So listen for that, but also that's a separate story again, which we can talk about at a later date when we talk about amplifiers. But certainly at this point, what you want to be hearing here is a very quick transient strike, and then that should leave you, and that's going to be, again, I'll have a heck of a lot to do with your room dynamics and the room treatment you have, whether you've got enough bass trapping in your room to be able to absorb that energy and stop it from continually blooming in the room. So have a listen for that. Enjoy these 5 tracks. They are absolute rippers. I use them quite a bit when I'm setting up subwoofers for people, and when I'm setting up that lower octave and getting an appreciation for what can happen in a room. So enjoy all of those. I will leave the track names, as I said, in the description below the video, so just look in there and you'll see track 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. I've done the same with mid-range now, and I'll be doing the same with the upper frequency stuff and all the other things that we do in this series. So thanks for watching. Love having you on board. If you're enjoying this kind of stuff, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, all I can do is ask you to consider doing that. It does help grow the channel, and that helps me push this sort of education and information out to more and more like-minded audiophiles. Love having everybody on board the Aussie Audiophile family, and I want to grow the family, and let's see where we can take it. So until next time, bye for now.